JonTron is arguably one of the most influential YouTubers of all time. He single-handedly pioneered the kinda sorta reviews, but with a stronger emphasis on comedy subgenre on YouTube, and constantly found new and innovative ways to make his content stand out. From his editing style to the production quality to even what he reviewed in general, it's clear John is an extremely talented creator who strives to make his work better with each new video. Or so it seemed. I don't know how many others I speak for, but coming from someone who used to watch JonTron religiously, he just kinda stopped being funny. Now, to put it in perspective, I started watching John back in like 2011 after my brother showed me a Sonic R video, which may rest in peace. And after that, I became obsessed with him. I watched all of his videos, I watched Game Grumps every day, and he even inspired me to make my own videos that were just blatant rip-offs of his stuff. Like I wasn't even trying. I won't show any of them to save myself the embarrassment, but if you mosey on over to my second channel and look for the Goroon archives, you can see for yourself. But I kept watching him for years until out of nowhere I just stopped, and I never really asked myself why. Maybe because I was getting fatigued from his videos, or because I found some new YouTubers I really liked, or maybe because my taste changed, I don't know. I was still subscribed to him at the time, so I'd always see his stuff in my feed, but I just never felt like watching him. That was until about 2 weeks ago, when I saw one of his new videos in my recommendations and thought, you know, why not give it a little watch and see how John's been doing? Because the last video of his I remember watching was Workplace Safety, over 4 years ago. So I sat down in my yoga ball, cup of watered down cranberry juice in hand, and put on the Most Cursed Dating Shows video. And I have to say, it really wasn't that good. This honestly was pretty shocking to me. Like I said, I hadn't been actively watching JonTron in years, but even when I stopped, I don't remember feeling as flat out uninterested as I did in that moment. And then I got a little panicky. I thought, oh god, was John ever funny to begin with? Well, yeah, obviously. Have you seen the Nightshade video? That thing is a classic, so clearly something else was at play here. And then I thought, was this just a single not-so-great video and all his other ones are still funny? Or has this been going on for a while now? And after digging around a bit more, yeah, it's been going on for a while now. Now, my original idea for this video was to go on an unhinged rant about John's new videos and all the reasons why I don't find them funny. But that would have been too easy, so instead I thought it'd be interesting to look back at all of his videos and see exactly how we got up to this point. You know, seeing how John's sense of humor, video making skills, and overall style has changed from his humble beginnings to where we are now. And I want to say two things real quick. Firstly, this isn't meant to be a rise and fall or JonTron exposed video, because I mean, he already does that to himself quite enough. It's more like a retrospective type of thing, to see what made his videos work in the past, and how it may not necessarily work in the present. And second, I know at the end of the day this is all subjective, you know? What I may not find funny, I'm sure tons of other people do. This is all just my opinion as someone who was a longtime fan of the show, and has grown kinda disappointed by the state it's in. So let's start off with what fans have dubbed the pilot of JonTron, his Daikatana review. So here we go. Oh my god, this is the cutest thing of all time, I swear to god. You can tell right off the bat this was John's first ever video. From his production quality to his personality, he was still pretty new to this. I'm not pointing this out to insult him, as everyone's first video was like this in one way or another. But it's the time period this video came out that makes it so funny. To give you context, the Daikatana video came out in 2010, and even though YouTube and other video sites had existed for a few years, a lot of creators, especially in the video game field, had trouble distinguishing themselves from one another. Because at that point, you were either an AVGN ripoff or making 144 Let's Plays of Mario 3 in your mom's basement. There was no in-between. John definitely teetered towards the AVGN side. I mean, he even acknowledges it in the video's description, but it was nowhere near as bad as like the Irate Gamer or the Game Dude. He just had a lot of the early 2010s snarky video game reviewer qualities, like not wanting to play the game they're reviewing.
Can't do much more of this, really can't.
A mildly agitated personality.
This is the first 3 minutes of the game.
The video being shot in their living room.
R and A. Because of this,
John, I want to watch
thought
football.
if it
Stop
wasn't for the
filming this
internet,
stupid
I
fucking
may have
video.
never-
Still, the video itself it's pretty okay. It doesn't really encapsulate John's style or personality that well, which, may not be the best look for an alleged pilot episode, but it still exists, I guess. And personally, I think the video serves better as a time capsule for both what the internet was like back then and how John started his career on YouTube. Because honestly, this video doesn't represent John's style moving forward. Sure, that can be argued about comparing his videos from 2014 to the ones now, but even then, there are still consistencies that are in all of his stuff that just don't exist here. It's not the fault of the video, he just found his style and ran with it. But yeah, overall, it's just okay. Anyway, so moving on from this, we're now going to be looking at the different eras of JonTron as a whole, rather than each individual episode, because I don't want to be here for 5 hours dissecting the food fight video. So let's not waste any time and jump right into Era 1. With a lot of TV shows, how the first season's not really that great because it hasn't found its groove yet? That's what I'd say the first half of this era was like. It's not bad, but there was definitely a lot of trial and error. For example, a good chunk of these early videos were either top 10s or random sketches, and even though the editing and production quality went up after the Daikatana video, they just weren't that interesting. I feel that was in part to the rapid upload schedule these early videos had, John probably thought he needed to have something out every couple days to satisfy his audience, but as a result, a lot of these are either half-baked or kinda uninspired. It felt like John was starting to develop a personality, but in terms of the content, it just felt kinda samey. That was until Dino City. This is where I believe John started honing his style, as the video feels way more concise than everything that came before it. Again, not calling these earlier videos bad, they just don't have flavor. To be honest, there are still a few of those early 2010s snarky game reviewer qualities I mentioned before, but the fat was trimmed down exponentially. John would keep the energy going, and by 2012, he'd be making not only the best videos on his channel, but some of the best on YouTube. There are so many absolute freaking classics from this time. Bubsy, Star Wars Connect, King's Quest, Birdemic. Oh my god, the Birdemic video is so funny it hurts. Every time I put it on, it's either the seriously reaction or the ending bit that has me rolling on the floor. Each and every time. That's another thing too, John's endings were always hilarious because he never knew how to end a video. He'd always cap it off with a random gag that was so dumb it was funny, or just did something that made no sense at all, like what the hell was even the Nightshade ending? John, what was this? His editing style also flourished during this time. For any veteran JonTron viewers like myself, his style used to be made up of big yellow text, shaking the screen, and that rando-ass 20s finger that pointed at everything. It had a very sophomoric feel to it, but in the best way possible. It was unique, but also human, which for me is the biggest thing. Because now that everybody has the exact same soulless editing style on YouTube, watching these videos was genuinely refreshing. Honestly, this shit still holds up to this day, like no question. But of course, you can't talk about JonTron from this time without bringing up the elephant in the room. Game Grumps. For anyone watching that doesn't know what Game Grumps is, you're lying. But I'll still indulge you. Game Grumps is a collaborative Let's Play channel originally created by John and a guy who used to go by the name Ego Raptor. The whole premise of the show was them playing games from their childhoods while unintentionally being idiots the entire time. Nowadays, shows like that are a dime a dozen, but back then it was considered revolutionary. Sure, there were still other channels like Super Best Friend Plays, but Game Grumps was extra special because these two already had pre-existing fandoms and communities, so when they came together, it was insane. Game Grumps was literally all I watched for a year. My sense of humor, opinions, and personality traits all came from that show, which, may not be the best thing for an 11-year-old, but that's besides the point. John and Aaron knew they had something special and kept the show's momentum going with consistent uploads, merchandise, and panels. And while this was all fine and dandy for Game Grumps fans, the same couldn't be said for JonTron fans. By this point in John's career, his upload speed started to slow down. Now, that's understandable given the boost in quality, but after joining Game Grumps, it tanked hard. Throughout John's time in the show, he'd only released 3 videos, which is a far cry from what his schedule is like even earlier that year. Suffice to say, his fans weren't happy, and John could see the writing on the wall. Mainly because they were so damn verbose about it, but still, something had to change. On June 25th, 2013, Game Grumps would upload a video titled Ode to John, announcing his departure from the show to focus on JonTron. Now, I'm only going to talk about this very briefly, because this single video has caused so many conspiracies, arguments, lies, you name it. Game Grumps fans were, and still are, parasocial to an unhealthy extent, so the fact that John and Aaron weren't playing games together unironically destroyed the fabric of their reality.
Please, donate today to put an end to these poor sad bastards writing conspiracy theories on 4chan about Egoraptor and JonTron not playing video games together anymore. Because really, how could any well-adjusted human being give a shit about any of this?
If you're interested in learning more, there's a plethora of video essays solely focused on this topic. But for right now, we're gonna do a little TLDR. So basically, John is replaced by Dan, moves to New York to work on JonTron, and Game Grumps fans are outraged, but who gives a shit about what they think? Overall, this era started out as nothing special, but became one of the most culturally significant things on the internet at the time. So many in-jokes, memes, and references came from this period alone, and watching John's style and production get better with each video proved how dedicated of a creator he was. I feel my opinion is fueled a little bit by nostalgia, but still, objectively speaking, these videos are great. But now let's move on to Era 2, John's glorious return. That's not its name, I just thought it sounded cool. Oh my god, dude, this era is great. You know, maybe it was for the best John left Game Grumps. So after relocating to New York, John would begin work on what he classified as Era 2 of the show. Previously, the idea of doing eras never really crossed his mind, which makes sense when rewatching Era 1. Like I said, it has a lot of great videos, but looking at the big picture, it doesn't feel concise from how much it changed over time. So now with John returning after 8 months, he wanted to give the show a new life, a new meaning. And as a result, this era is fantastic. For starters, there's once again another bump in production quality. Camera work, lighting, audio, all of it is on point here. But what's significant is that you can still see John's qualities in the production itself. This is something I've seen a bunch of YouTubers struggle with as the quality of their videos increases, because of other factors at play like more people being part of the process, or deadlines that need to be fulfilled. Sadly, we might be coming back to this point later on, but for the time being, it's amazing to see how much of John's essence is still in the show as it evolves. But aside from the production, the videos themselves are still super entertaining. Now of course that's thanks to his humor, editing, all of that jazz, but something that helped was his new way of structuring videos. Instead of focusing a video on a single game, he'd do it on a broad subject or category and look at multiple games that fit into it. This can be seen with Hercules games, anti-drug games, plug-and-play consoles, and the reason why it works is because he can focus on the few highlights of one game and move on to the next without having it overstay its welcome. Because there were a few videos in Era 1 where he'd review a single game and yeah, it'd be funny, but there'd always be a few points where he was like grasping for straws when looking for stuff to make fun of. Era 2 as a whole just feels way more concise now that John understood his style and what videos he wanted to make. This is evident with him ditching stuff like top 10s or sketches and instead being more ambitious with his reviews, whether it be with a unique topic or branching out from video games into TV shows and movies. And even though John already had a large audience during Era 1 and Game Grumps, this era in specific introduced a lot of new people to JonTron from how high quality and entertaining these videos were. I remember during this time, it was a big deal whenever John uploaded. He'd be trending on Twitter, new memes would sprout up all over the place, and the view counts would constantly skyrocket. As much as I loved John on Game Grumps and still believe the show will never be as good as it was back then, I'm glad he chose to focus on JonTron. It's clear this was his true calling, as he put his heart, mind, body, blood, sweat, tears, and all that other crap into these videos. But all good things must come to an end, as Era 2 saw its metaphorical finale in December 2014 with the zoo race. One of my personal favorites, if you ask me. And over the next few months, John would take a short break to begin work on Era 3, and with how much of an absolute banger Era 2 was, myself and countless other JonTron fans were eagerly waiting to see what he had in store. So now let's move on to the next chapter of John, Era 3. Whoa! Era 3 is, it's alright. Well, it's a little more complicated than that. So Era 3 was predominantly made up of a mini-series called Starcade, where John reviewed a bunch of Star Wars games from different consoles and generations. The series itself isn't bad. In fact, objectively speaking, it's impressive how much effort went into this. Like, if you told me this Millennium Falcon set was used in the actual Star Wars films, I might believe you. But I don't think this is what John's fans were expecting necessarily, especially with how consistent the videos in Era 2 were, both in terms of quality and being traditional JonTron videos. And because of that, Starcade did alienate a portion of his fan base, not because it was bad, but from how much he focused on it. For almost 9 months, this was all John uploaded. Aside from Barbie games and the Titanic song, there hadn't been a traditional JonTron video from February 2015 to October 2015. Everything else released during this time period was solely Starcade, and coupled with some lengthy waits between releases, this point in John's career confused the hell out of his fans. Now, in John's defense, he would make an update video going over a lot of the misconceptions about the series. Essentially, John was approached by a company to make Starcade in February 2015, and feeling like this was an offer he couldn't refuse, he said yes, and pre-production started shortly after. But around halfway through production, they hit a massive snag, causing a bunch of delays, which is why there were huge release gaps around the middle of the series. I respect that John was honest with these issues, as this seemed to be his first time being part of a larger production, but I think it would have helped if he was a little more vocal about them earlier on, instead of keeping his fans in the dark. Even though I don't find Starcade super funny, I still respect it for its clever premise and higher production. John stated he made this series because Star Wars is one of his favorite franchises and wanted to pay homage to it, and that's very clear in the final product. This came out around the same time YouTube Red did, where tons of other YouTubers were releasing limited series similar to Starcade, only with way less passion and you had to pay for them, so, props to John for one-upping everybody. But by the end of 2015, Starcade would finish and John returned to making his traditional videos. However, this is where I started to notice some changes with the show, as this era has a, we'll put it lightly, interesting variety of videos. Most of them still focused on games or TV shows, but now there were things like sketches he did with H3H3, live gaming videos, and even some musical stuff. These aren't terrible, but it's a similar problem the first half of Era 1 had, where John was trying out so many different things and not all of it stuck. Of course, these are two different points in John's career, but the main issue of them being unfocused is still present, and as a result, some of these just feel like filler. I understand John wanting to upload more frequently, because his stuff takes a while to make, but it's the whole quality versus quantity situation, and sadly, I don't think many of these are too great. But I will say, John's traditional videos from this time are still funny. Some of my favorites being Titanic Legend Goes On, Disney Bootlegs, and Talking Cat. I did notice these episodes are a bit slower paced than the ones from Era 2, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing, as it ties into the show's production. There's a lot more focus on practical effects and visual gags, like Grimbo and Food Games, or the intro to Titanic. The humor comes from how surreal these moments are, and their impressive quality, with stuff like costumes or cinematography. It's not as in-your-face and rapid as John's humor used to be, but it still complements his videos now that they've gone through another change. TLDR, this era wasn't bad, it just felt unfocused, with Starcade taking up an entire year of uploads to some of the hit-or-miss filler videos later on. It just wasn't as consistent as Era 2. Again, there were still a lot of great videos from this time, and these complaints could be chalked up to John wanting to experiment and branch out. That's exactly what happened with Era 1, and after a little bit of trial and error, he found his shtick, so who's to say the exact same thing wasn't happening here? Era 3 would come to an end in December 2016, and after a long hiatus for, one reason or another, John finally came back in August 2017, with the introduction of Era 4. So yeah, let's just get into it, bros. Yippee! Sorry. So, for some reason, Era 4 was only 5 episodes long. I don't know why, but that's just how it be. In a lot of ways, Era 4 feels like a continuation of Era 3, but, 8 months later. Same production quality, sets, jokes, all that stuff. It's like each era is its own video game, but Era 4 is like DLC for 3. If you want to look at it like that. I don't know why you'd want to, but, The biggest thing Era 4 had going for it though was of course the flex tape video. Now, I'm sure we're all acquainted with flex tape and all the crazy memes and shit that came out of it, but this was one of the most viral things on the internet when it was released, even for JonTron standards. For context, John's videos always did super well, a lot of the time reaching into the tens of millions in view count. But the flex tape video exploded out of nowhere, and in turn introduced a whole new group of people to JonTron, which again is crazy to think about, with John already having a large fan base and been making videos for 7 years by then. Not saying John was becoming irrelevant, but it was nice to see his channel get another boost in popularity. Outside of that, Era 4 still feels like a continuation of 3, but there were some small things I noticed after rewatching it. For starters, this was the first era to be completely devoid of video game reviews. That could be excused by the shorter length, but it was surreal to see John moving away from the very thing he founded his channel on, especially since he was like the kingpin of them on YouTube. Another thing I noticed was his pixel art slowly being phased out. Starting back in Era 2, John would always have a little pixel animation with him and Jacques interacting with something related to the episode. It was always a cute little bumper that gave it more character and was just fun to see. But after the Vanilla Ice video, he would get rid of not only the intro animations, but his pixelated avatar he used in the thumbnails, and even the opening with him and Jacques walking around. That was a staple of his show since the very beginning, and now you're gonna take that away from me? What is wrong with you, John? Because of these changes, John's videos started losing their personality for me. They were still entertaining, like VR Troopers and Flex Tape are great, but a lot of the smaller things that made John stand out earlier in his career were slowly going away. Maybe he felt like he didn't need them anymore, or they weren't representative of the channel. Regardless, it's something that stuck out to me during my research, and to be honest, it was kinda sad to see. Other than that, there's not much else to say for Era 4. Once again, it was only 5 episodes long, and the only substantial thing out of all of them was Flex Tape, which, no matter how you feel about John, that was a fantastic meme, let's be real. But as soon as Era 4 started, it was over. After a pretty lengthy hiatus that preceded it, the channel would enter an even longer one after VR Troopers. And I know this is a common theme for John, but it's like, why? What are you even doing? Isn't this supposed to be your job? But he would return a year later and begin what is currently the longest running era of the channel, Era 5. Alright, let's get into it. Era 5 is complicated. For newer fans that started watching John after Flex Tape, they probably still enjoy a lot of these newer videos. But for longtime fans like myself, the more it's gone on, the sadder it's gotten. Let's start with the beginning. So after yet another long-ass hiatus, John returned with the introduction of Era 5. And to be perfectly honest, it actually was a really great comeback. Not only did he do a great follow-up to Flex Tape and even got Phil Swift to guest star, but the videos that came after were incredible as well. Soulja Boy's game console, Crystal Vodka, workplace safety. It seemed like John had rediscovered himself during the break and was back to making videos as high quality as the ones from Era 2. Or so it seemed. Remember when I said John's videos were starting to lose a bit of personality during Era 4? Well, the longer Era 5 has gone on, the worse this problem has gotten, and it all has to do with the video topics themselves. Ever since the end of Era 1, John's always been great at making the subject of his videos unique or stand out in some way, whether it be reviewing obscure video games, reviewing multiple games in the same category, or something completely out of left field like, again, Flex Tape. Because even though John's a funny guy, it's all about having unique material instead of just reviewing something popular because everyone else is doing it. That's one of the things that made him stand out early on and got him as successful as he is. But looking at a lot of his newer content, that's sadly not the case anymore. A good portion of John's newer videos are him following popular trends like tier lists, buying weird stuff online, or reacting to other YouTube videos. I know a lot of his content is him reacting to stuff, but it feels more unique seeing him watch a random PSA from the 80s instead of like the most disliked YouTube videos or a channel like 100 Thieves. Even when a video is original, a lot of the time it ends up feeling like filler again, like Johnny New England or simplifying corporate logos. The concept doesn't seem fleshed out enough when compared to something like workplace safety. That's not to say all the Era 5 videos are bad, but because of how frequent these trend chasing or filler ones are, the level of quality is never consistent. But this is without acknowledging the biggest culprit of them all. John's objectively worst video, you will not recover from watching this video. This is quite possibly one of the most humiliating things I've ever seen a YouTuber do for the sake of money. Basically, this is just a 6-minute ad for some shitty phone app John definitely didn't play. There's nothing wrong with having sponsors, but people usually shout them out for like a minute during a video that's about something completely different. Here, the entire video is about a sponsor, not a game or a movie, just people who are giving him money. Whatever happened to getting like a Patreon or something, you know? If it was set up well, I'm sure his fans would be more than happy to support him. Tons of big YouTubers still have Patreons, and it makes even more sense for John given the higher production of the show. And thankfully, I'm not the only one who thinks this, because if you look in the comments section of this video, it's full of people grilling the shit out of him. And rightfully so. If a creator you respect does something stupid, they should be called out profusely so they never think about doing it again. So good job, guys. I'm glad we bullied John together. It was at this point when I realized JonTron isn't funny anymore. It's not because he's chilled out, I promise. But after watching his last 15 videos or so, I've noticed they all have the exact same problems in terms of the humor. John rambles and stutters way too much. I don't know why he feels the need to act so awkward and uncomfortable with everything, but it's just annoying. And I know awkward humor is popular now thanks to unfunny Reddit kids, but John was literally the funniest goddamn person for years. Senses of humor do change, but like, what happened? Because of this, he'll try extremely hard to sell jokes or gags, which works occasionally, but most of the time they're horribly dragged out. Like, watch some of these clips and tell me they'd be way funnier if they were cut down by at least a few seconds.
Hey Falcor, you seem like a pretty nice guy and all, but I'm pretty sure the Italian restaurant was like 20 blocks back. Yeah, I saw it. This is not my idea of romance. I'm not ready to join the Mile High Club!
I started screaming like crazy. Someone called the police. The police came, but they wouldn't come in. My God, you could smell the whole thing from the top of St. Peter's Square. There wasn't enough rigatoni in all of Rome that would have convinced me to go in there. They were terrified hearing me scream that way. No, the screaming was fine. It was the biblical volume of shit that colored my decision.
I'm dead serious, okay? I come in here, I'm pulling one of these absolute mind benders. What do you do here? You're absolutely, completely helpless. What are you gonna do here? Honestly, tell me, what the hell are you gonna do? All right, by the time, you're gonna panic. And by the time the police come, I'm gonna be in the underbrush. What are you gonna do here? Tell me, you have very limited options. How to pronounce Utrecht. Okay?
Utrecht.
Utrecht. Wait, that can't be right. Oh, we're on the American pronunciation. Let's switch to the Dutch the British pronunciation.
Utrecht.
I feel so cultured. There's just no way. I'm learning. Utrecht. There's no replacement for being worldly. Give me a Dutch guy saying Utrecht for God's sake. How do you say it? I know it's not bad.
Utrecht.
That's it. That's the one. That's the official pronunciation. Sorry, Netherlands. Gonna have to update your lexicon.
Again, comedy is subjective, so if you think John's funny, that's perfectly fine. But for me, it's just not doing it anymore. And this isn't even like an iDub situation where John's reforming his image and condemning his old videos. And something I asked myself when writing the script was, did John change his humor because of how different the internet is nowadays? And from what I saw, the answer is no. John's older videos were never that offensive. He may have said fuck a lot, which, you know, wouldn't fly on YouTube nowadays. But overall, people can go back and watch his old stuff and find nothing problematic with them. I'm sure there are guidelines and rules he has to follow given his sponsors, but he just stopped being funny out of nowhere. In general, Era 5 barely feels like JonTron anymore. From uninspired videos to not being funny to missing characteristics that made the show special, the channel just feels like an empty husk of what it used to be. I feel like this is where a lot of longtime fans stopped watching because it just doesn't feel like the same show we originally fell in love with. I'm glad John wanted to branch out as a creator, but it was just too far. I don't know, something just went wrong in the process. You know, maybe it was the Destiny controversy or he just lost his spark, but this isn't it, Chief. I'm not gonna lie, it was a little sad making this video at points after watching one of my favorite creators slowly get less enjoyable over time. Who started out as one of the most unique and acclaimed creators on the site now feels devoid of all the qualities that gave him that status in the first place. By no means is this as bad as other creators' digressions like H3H3, because at least John isn't a smug asshole and only sometimes shares bad political opinions. But it still hurts since there really aren't many creators like John anymore, or at least ones who feel as ambitious as he was. Like I said earlier, it was genuinely refreshing watching his older videos and seeing someone with a unique editing style, format, and overall way of presenting themselves. You could definitely see his inspiration, but he knew how to spin them and make something new with it. But despite all of this, I do hope he's able to recapture that spark he used to have. John's proven himself to be an extremely talented and capable creator. Even though I don't enjoy his videos anymore, objectively speaking, there's clearly still effort being put into them. I mean, for heaven's sake, the man has an entire crew that helps put the show together. Sure, the topics can be uninspired or the videos themselves not being funny, but I feel if he puts his mind to it, John can create something great again. Or probably not, I don't know. I'm gonna cut this off before it gets too sappy, but bottom line, John needs to go back to making videos that stick out from everyone else's, both in subject matter and style. And also finish Sonic 06.
And